So we're gonna talk about the first RLCS Open, starting with EU, and we're gonna just I'm gonna try to make my predictions for at least the group stage. The Swiss has already happened, and we can scroll down here. We can see some results of the Swiss. I think I was a little surprised. JJ Rocks is a team that has been around, at least around the Rocket League scene for a while, and they just cannot seem to get a roster that clicks. But I was a little surprised 4-wheel drive didn't make it, or forward. But we also have teams like Scooby-Doo and Gifty Mode, which has like Scrub Killer on it, who's an old he's been around the scene. He's a world champion, and but he hasn't really been in the professional scene for a while. And they played these Swisses last weekend, and now we are left with these groups over here. I was trying to figure out for the longest time. It probably took me a little too long today to figure out how exactly the seeding for these worked, because you would have so like Synergy and 100% are in this group, but every other matchup is a matchup against the different Swisses. And so it took me way too long to figure it out. I had to use a little bit of brain power, and eventually I figured it out. That all it is so you have Carmine as the 1 seed in Group A, and they're playing the 8 seed from Group B, and then Gentlemates would be your 2A playing against your 7B, and then Geek A is the Tanaka team. They got picked up today, actually, was the announcement, where they now have an org, and that would be that's Archie, Joyo, and Oli. And so they're the 3A playing against the 6B. And then for whatever reason, the 4-5A still get to play one another. So I don't exactly know what the reasoning for that is, but that's above my pay grade. So, and then over in Group B, we obviously have the 1B versus the 8A, the 2B, the Stormtroopers against the 7A, and then you have RRG, who is the 3B, playing against the 6A in Caliente, and then you have the 4 and 5B playing against each other. And right off the bat, what did surprise me is the fact that what surprised me is the fact that Vitality was supposed to come into this game. They were supposed to be like the top of the top. They were supposed to be the team to beat, and out of nowhere they dropped a game, and they dropped the first game of their first series of the day, and that was kind of surprising to me. And you can see over here on the Liquipedia page, there's a new stat that they're going over, which is I'm not even going to attempt to say that. I'm going to attempt to say it. The Buchholz score. I'm probably butchering that pronunciation, but what this score is it takes your opponents. So, like Ninjas, we'll just look at Ninjas in Pajamas. They played RRG. RRG went 3-1 on the day. So that's 3 wins, 1 loss. And then they played the Big Boys. The Big Boys went 1-3. So if you add up the 3-1 record and the 1-3 record, you've got 4-4. So that would be a BU of 0. But then when you look at the last team that they played for the day, which was Save the Game went 3-2, which would give them the breakdown of that would be 7-6 would be the records of everybody that NIP played. And so that would give them I'm just going to call it a B score of 1. And what I believe this score is for is it tries to give you a strength of schedule for every team. So the higher this number is, the stronger someone's schedule is. So like 4-wheel drive or forward, they had a tough schedule. Save the Game also had a tough schedule. If you look at Save the Game and who they played, every team that they played except for 3 aces qualified or they made top 8 and qualified for the next stage. So the higher this number is, the easier of a run somebody had. So if you're looking at the top 8, you could argue based on the records of the teams that Redemption played, Redemption probably had the easiest run into the top 8. Now, what worries me is, again, the more negative, the easier someone's run was. Vitality had a -3 B score, and they still went 3-1. They were supposed to be like the super team coming out of EU, and they ended up 4th in their group because they dropped that first game. And I don't know. Vitality's performance surprised me, but we'll start getting into a little bit of predictions when we look at Carmine versus this team. I don't speak. They are a full Italian team. I don't speak Italian. I think no, they're a full French team. This is a team of 3 French players that like nobody had heard of. At least I haven't. I have not heard of these guys until they showed up to this Open, and then they qualify. So it's kind of crazy for them, but regardless of them being like breakout stars or coming onto the scene kind of out of nowhere, I don't see them beating Carmine. And the way that, let me get into the format before we start putting numbers here. The formatting of this stage is a GSL bracket, and so what that means is pretty much you lose 2, you're disqualified, or you go home. If you lose 2, you're out. If you win 2, you qualify for your guaranteed qualification for the next stage. So like here, if Carmine wins, they obviously move on. And then if they win again, they go to this upper bracket final, and they would play this 3rd game to decide whether they're the 1 or the 2 seed going into the playoff stage. So, and then they battle it out down here. There is a loser's bracket again. You lose 2, you're done. You win 2. So if you drop down round 1, and then you win 2, you end up here in the lower bracket final, which guarantees you a qualification spot. You're just playing for, are you going to be the 3 seed or the 4 seed going into it? So we'll jump into it. Based on this, Carmine had a B score of 2, so it was kind of a wash of a run. It was a little harder than most, or it was a little harder than like the average. But and then we also have, I'm just going to call him Selly. Selly had a -3, so their run was a little easier, and they still just skated in, barely finished with a 0 game differential, which is kind of impressive, playing 5 matches. But in these best of 5s, I think Carmine is just going to be too much off the bat. I would be surprised if Selly got a game, so I would probably call that a 3-0, and we'll do the 2 seed next. Gentlemates, we have a roster of Juicy, Seiko, Redocin, and they'll be going up against Start Point, who is a Chronic, Metane, and Eugen. And again, Gentlemates is one of those rosters that they're proven, even if they have switched the team up a little bit. I do think Redocin is a quality player. He's going to be a great addition to this team. And I just think Gentlemates are going to be way too much for them. Gentlemates did have a 0 B score, but they also swept all 3 of their series. So Gentlemates are looking like they are in form. And then you have Start Point, who game differential is 0. They had a -1 B score, so they kind of had a slightly easier run than average. And I just think Gentlemates, it's going to be too much. I see them continuing the sweep streak. And then if we look at Gike, our new Tanaka team, I'm happy that this team got picked up. Archie, Joyo, and Oli. After watching Worlds, after being at Worlds, getting to see Archie and Joyo and Oski play for Oxygen, I was super excited to see them there. I was so glad that they were the extra team that got brought in, and they made big fans out of me. I'm a big fan of this roster, and I hope that they do well. And I'm going to have them beating Save the Game. And Save the Game's roster is Astral, Extra, and Mitzer. So, and while Astral is good, Astral looked phenomenal in the FIFA E World Cup. Extra is back in RLCS after a pretty big hiatus away from it. And although they did qualify, although they did play decently well, I mean, they had an extremely difficult run into this. Like I said, 4 of the 5 teams that they played qualified for the next stage. So they had an extremely difficult run, but I do think that Tanaka or Ike was right there with them. Slightly easier if you just look at the performance of the other teams. But if their only loss was to Carmine, I'm going to have to give it to them. I will say that it's going to be a closer series. Do I think it'll be a 3-2? I don't think it's going to go game 5. I'd call it a 3-1 in Gike's favor. And then if we look at the 4-5 matchup out of Group A, we have Synergy and 100%. Synergy's roster is made up of AJG over from Argentina, Dorito, and yep, that guy's name. I think. And then 100%, you got Louis P, Acro, and Rezi. And part of me just wants to go with 100% just because of the name. But after looking at the performances, I think it's hard to go against Synergy. They already beat 100%. They swept them in the Swiss stage. I think it would be like, yeah, you could say 100% is going to try to make a comeback. They're going to try to run back at Synergy, but I think Synergy is just going to do the exact same thing. And I think they're going to sweep. So Group A through the quarters is looking pretty boring. And it's not going to stay that way, though. As we get into the lower quarters, I am going to say that I think 100% is going to beat Selly. What is it going to be, though? If I had to throw a number on it, looking at some B scores, we got a -3 against another -3. And I think you look at rosters again, Acro, Rezi, and then the new kids on the block is what I'm going to call them. Man. I'm going to say 100% is going to take that. I think this might be our first game 5 of the day. And then we also get Save the Game versus Start Point. And Acronic and Matane are names that have been around the scene. Astral and Extra. Also, I do think that here is where Astral is going to shine in this series. It's going to be a winner go home. And I think Astral is going to pull it off. I think Save the Game is going to win. Probably, I'm going to call it 3-1, and we'll go from there and see what happens. And as we move up to the upper bracket finals, Carmine is just going to continue to do what they do. I think they're going to sweep Synergy. I don't know if a lot of detail needs to be gone into there. And then also Gentlemates versus Geeke. Now, at Worlds, I called Oxygen upsetting Gentlemates, and then they pulled it off. I'm going to say that they do it again, even with this new Gentlemates roster. And I know that this Geeke roster is not the same as the Oxygen roster, but I'm going to call it. I'm going to say Geeke moves on, but it is going to be a battle. It's going to be a 3-2, and that is going to guarantee qualification for Carmine and Geeke. And then Gentlemates drops down. That's no question for me whatsoever. And I also think that between Synergy and Save the Game, I feel like I would have to go with Save the Game. Again, I just know more about them. Now, Save the Game had a much harder run and pulled it out. They showed that they got grit, and 100% had an easy run and still managed to drop a game, even if it was to the person one spot above them. I'd probably call it I lied. I'm going to call it a 3-0. Gentlemates sweep. They move on, and they're guaranteed a spot in the playoffs. And then we have Save the Game versus Synergy. And I already said I think Save the Game's going to claim that one. And I think that, based on what we've seen, I think Save the Game is going to 3-1 that series. So we're guaranteed 4 of our top 8 going into the playoff is going to be Carmine versus Geeke, which, as much as I would love for them to win it, I don't think Geeke will. I do think that they're at least going to take a game off of Carmine, and then I'm going to give it to Gentlemates. They're going to also 3-1 their series. So we have Carmine, Geeke, Gentlemates, and Save the Game moving on in that we'll look down here at this bracket and what that could entail later. But as we slide on over to Group B, we got Ninjas in Pajamas, which is probably the team I'm most excited to watch, versus Ascend. Now, Ascend is a new team of Geek, Matt, and Nico. I don't know much about them, to be completely honest with you, but the Ninjas in Pajamas roster, you got Itachi, Nas, and Oski. Again, huge. I'm super excited to watch this team. I think they're going to sweep Ascend. I think they're going to go through. And even just if we want to go look at B scores, we can. Ascend had a -5. NIP had a 1, so that NIP had a harder run at it and still almost swept through all their series. So it's kind of hard to root against them. Stormtroopers as the 2 seed against Novo. Novo Esports is Hyder, Dead, and Mala. This is our all-Italian team. And looking at Stormtroopers roster, Stormtroopers are Abjack, Jorias, and Stizzy. This is going to be the Dignitas roster. It has not been officially announced yet, but Violent Panda's been with Dignitas his entire career. Stizzy, if you look at his Twitter, still says Dig Stizzy as his handle. And so this is just going to be Stormtroopers will get picked up by a team. It's going to be Dignitas. We'll just wait for that to become official, but I've been waiting on that for quite some time. So Dignitas, Stormtroopers, they are going to 3-0 our Italian team and move on. Next, we have the 3 seed of RRG, which is Goffs, Rizex, and Risefox. And against Caliente, which is K-Dop, Sizen, and Growly. Now, I will say Caliente is a team that I'm surprised struggled as much as they did. It is weird seeing K-Dop not on Vitality, but Sizen was doing his thing in the qualifier. Sizen looked very good in the qualifier, but against a team like RRG, who they had a somewhat easier run. They did run into NIP, they ran into Save the Game, and beat Save the Game, but I think just if I had to pick a team, RRG did perform well in their group, but I also think Caliente had both groups were actually very difficult. I think RRG is going to take it. I think RRG had a much harder group to play through with the Dignitas roster, with Vitality, with Save the Game. And so I think RRG can continue that, and I think that it could come down to a 3. I'm going to say a 3-1, and that's it. And then we got Vitality versus Redemption. The new Vitality is supposed to be like the Reapers of the region. And again, they came in and they lost their first round, which was kind of surprising. But Vitality got Zen, Exotic, Monkey Moon, and they dropped their first game to Forward, which again, big shocker in my opinion, versus Redemption, which is Cash, Smokes, and Toxic. I think once Vitality woke up, once they lost, I think there was a quick hit in the mouth, and then they took care of business. And now they did have an easier run if you look at their B score. But at the end of the day, I do think Vitality is a better team, and I'm going to give it to them being a 3-0 for Vitality, which leads us to Ascend and Redemption down here. I don't think that game is going to be super interesting. I think that Redemption is going to take care of business. Again, Redemption and Ascend, they both had -5 B scores. It took Ascend an extra round to get there. And I just think that based on what we've seen so far, Redemption is going to be the better team. But I do think that they're at least going to take a game. I'll give it 3-1. Now, Caliente, I have them beating Novo. I think they could potentially sweep Novo, and I'm gonna bank on that. I'm gonna hope for that. I'm hoping for a 3-0. We'll see. Now, moving up to the upper bracket, NIP versus Vitality. This could be a grand final. Any other day of the week, if these two don't run into each other on the same side of the bracket, that could be a grand final. And as much as I would love to say NIP is going to take that, I think Dignitas is going to wake up. They're going to take care of business, and it's going to be, I think it's going to be a 3-1. And then Dignitas, Stormtroopers, I'm going to have them beating RRG. I'm going to have it also being a 3-1. So in our upper bracket final, we got Vitality and the future Dignitas roster. RRG is going to win there. Ninjas in Pajamas is going to win there. It's going to be a 3-0 and another 3-0. And then I have Ninjas in Pajamas winning that one 3-1. And Dignitas is going to beat... Man, I would love for them to beat Vitality. Monkey Moon's guaranteed the rest of the weekend. I want to pick Dignitas, but I think Vitality's going to show up. I think it's going to be close. It could be a 3-2, and we'll go from there. So there is our Group B setup. I've got Vitality, Stormtroopers / Dignitas, Ninjas in Pajamas, and RRG qualifying through. And so what that would look like for a bracket down here, and I'm not going to predict this bracket yet. I'm going to wait and see what the actual bracket becomes, just because that would be... If I get one of these teams wrong, the rest of the bracket looks different, and none of that matters. So, but if I had to pick a team, if I just had to pick one team out of this that I think... If I had to pick a team out of the top 4 teams to think they will win this event, it would probably have to be Carmine. It'd have to be KC, and then I think if there's a team that's going to go on a run, it's going to be Ninjas in Pajamas. Pajamas, NIP, whatever we want to call them. My upper team to watch would be Carmine. I think they're going to show up. They're going to take care of business. They're going to do what they need to do. And then I think NIP has a chance to make a serious run. Gentlemates does too, but I would look more at NIP than I would at Gentlemates, but only time will tell. We'll see what happens, but that is kind of my prediction of the group stage. I'm hoping to, once the group stage is finalized, which this stage plays out on Friday, January 10th. They'll play this whole stage out, and then playoffs will begin Saturday the 11th, and we will see what happens. I'm going to try to have I predicted this. I'm going to try to do a little recording of the playoffs once it's actually set, and we'll go from there. But those are my predictions. As of right now, this is my top 8. This is the seeding that I think I would put them at. And we'll see if I'm right. We'll compare tomorrow. But until then, thanks for being here.